willing and wants to disarm Hezbollah. And it's doing what it is planning on doing, right? Like it's kind of attacking the areas that Israel knows where Hezbollah has weapons, ammunitions, tunnels, etc. Right? Now, when we're talking about Hezbollah as a force, and I want to highlight something, I want you guys to kind of redirect you to our YouTube, because we also had other exclusives today with Lebanese members of parliament who also shared with us an exclusive interviews that they do support the direct negotiations, that they do. Also, one of them said that he actually supports direct negotiations and meeting between between the Lebanese president, Joseph Aoun, and the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. But one of the major issues and the obstacles, in my opinion, which is what you just mentioned, Dan, the problem here is that you have Hezbollah infiltrating and already is a part of the Lebanese army. And this is the battle of the future, because Hezbollah is weakened significantly in other areas, right? In other parts of Lebanon. Now, it still has, of course, areas where they have stockpiles, where they have ammunition, where they have missiles, all of the above that Israel is targeting. But how would you confront the Hezbollah elements that have already been a strong part of the Lebanese military? And this is where the Lebanese state and the Lebanese military will have to do it on their own. And I think this is going to be the conflict of the future, even if we do see continued negotiations, possible meetings, hopefully a deal. How is Lebanon going to deal with these elements of Hezbollah within its own military? I would like to hear your perspective, Mansour, on this.
I think, like you said, the real job is going to be in the hands of the Lebanese. And the real question is, do the Lebanese have what it takes? Because they are incapable of getting Hezbollah out of their system. They've been there for too long, in the government, in the army, in the civil sector. And they eliminated all the competition that was able to get them out. So now the only way to get them out is actually to allow Israel to use extreme levels of military force. And I'm saying as someone who comes from that world, and I know what I'm talking about here. So one thing we're seeing here is that peace through strength works. We're seeing that Israel is speaking power and respect, and all of a sudden Lebanon is all about peace. We need to remember that anti-Semitism was very, very strong in Lebanon. It didn't disappear. So now they have two challenges. Can they uproot anti-Semitism from their midst and truly want to have a peace? Because Israel want to have peace with them. I know it for a fact. I'm an Israeli. Do they truly want to have peace with us? That's number one. And are they going to take actions to actually make that? Number two is, are they willing to go all the way? We're seeing in Iran that the Iranians are literally saying, please keep bombing us. We've never seen in history the nation, the people in the nation, getting upset when the enemy countries stopped attacking them. If you ask most Iranians, they're very concerned and upset that America and Israel stopped, bombing that regime, because they see that if we don't finish the job, they're going to be stuck with the same regime. So does Lebanon have what it takes to actually go through that? It's sad, it's a harsh reality, but that's what happened when you allow an Islamic terrorist regime to control your country for 25 years. The only way to pluck them out is going to be, in some ways, flattening a big part of your country. I don't say it lightly, but look what happened in Gaza. Hamas didn't leave and is still there. They're refusing to leave. And Gaza is completely almost flattened. So are the Lebanese willing to pay the price of freedom? And it's going to be a heavy price, because if Israel start doing that, and then, in a month from now, 2 months from now, they're going to start calling Israel again baby killers, this, that, and because Hezbollah is going to use them as human shields, then at a certain point, Israel will just achieve its goals and just pull out. Okay, guys, stay there on your own. But are they really willing to work hand in hand with Israel and to do the dirty job of going and plucking out Hezbollah from every nest in Lebanon? It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be clean. It's going to be very, very dirty. That is, I think, the real question that is still need to be answered. With that said, we are seeing things that we've never seen before. There are leaders meeting with our leaders. There are people calling for peace with our people. These are amazing voices, but that's just the beginning.
in every sense of the word. I mean,
It's
especially for
historical.
people like
Yeah.
us, like you said, Mansour, who speak Arabic, who know the rhetoric and how people used to speak about the idea of peace. It was completely demonized, you know? So it's
It
historic.
was completely demonized and it's actually illegal. And so now you're hearing actually calls from Congress in the United States on Lebanon to repeal that law that it's illegal for contact with anything Israel or Israeli. Although the atmosphere is warm. Look, I'll say something. It's very hard to completely dismantle a terrorist organization, especially when that terrorist organization is religiously, ideologically motivated, as is Hezbollah. You have a couple of elements at play here, though. So Israel, first of all, what a lot of people don't understand, and I wrote a big piece on this on our and people can check out our article platform, which is called mideastjournal.org, Mideast Journal. If you want to throw up the link to that on the screen, if people want to check it out. So I wrote an article of what exactly is Israel doing in South Lebanon. Mansour, you mentioned all the Shia villages, not the Christian ones, were flattened in South Lebanon, the ones along the border, and it's really unfortunate. But the problem is, and just like in Gaza, is Hezbollah has buried itself in the civilian infrastructure under the houses. I don't know if you guys saw, there was a village where there was a massive kilometers long tunnel network that stored weapons and was basically an underground base. And the IDF blew it up earlier this week, or last week. It was
I think
unbelievable.
the earthquake was felt all the way in the north part of Israel.
That's how big it was. That's how many tons of explosives to blow up this underground network. Hezbollah has done this for since in southern Lebanon since 2000, when Israel pulled out of Lebanon. And the lesson, unfortunately, both from Gaza and from Lebanon, is that if the state or the sovereign, in Gaza's case, Hamas is the sovereign, still is, and certainly has been until last year. And in Lebanon's case, Hezbollah isn't the sovereign, but it's stronger than the sovereign. So if the sovereign, if the responsible entity, if the international community, if the regional powers aren't going to do what they need to do, and that's to pull the threat back from the borders, then Israel realized it has to go in, and it has to flatten villages, and it has to destroy terror infrastructure. And I don't think people realize what terror infrastructure means. I don't think people realize what it means that every home in a village is set up to fire rockets, that there are tunnels under entire villages. I mean, it's just something that people around the world really don't understand. I'll say two more points on this, and one is, unlike the West Bank, where it's a whole different scenario, because Israel, or a lot of Israelis, have territorial claims from historic and religious reasons on those territories. Israel has zero territorial claims on Gaza, zero territorial claims in Lebanon. And so peace is actually easy with Lebanon. Israel doesn't want any part of Lebanon. Most of Lebanon has no problem with Israel. And so the big question here is this: and how do you dismantle a terror group? So first of all, the more that actually Iran struggles financially, the less money it has to pay its proxies. And what we know is actually that Hezbollah fighters are not getting paid. And we think they're all, jihadist ideological fanatics. I think a lot of them are in this. I mean, I don't think anyone there is saying, I love Israel, but I'm getting paid, so I'm going to fight Israel. But I have a feeling that a decent amount of them are there because they're getting paid. And when they don't get paid, they're less motivated to possibly risk their life fighting Israel, or sit in a dark tunnel, or sit in an ambush, waiting to shoot at Israeli troops. And we've actually seen that some of them are just leaving, some of them are deserting, some of them are not showing up. So how do you choke off the finances to this organization? They also have a financial infrastructure network in Lebanon. They own gas stations, for example. They own smuggling networks. They deal with drugs. I don't know if it's still true. There was a whole thing uncovered a couple of years ago where there was a car thief network connected to blood diamonds, connected to cocaine trafficking that Hezbollah was a part of as a way to fund itself. Choke off their finances, choke off the funding. The atmosphere in Lebanon is continuing to get more and more aggressive against Hezbollah. And at one point, if Israel can clear South Lebanon out of Hezbollah, and every time there's a fight, kill 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, Hezbollah actually came out this week and said, 2,500 of our fighters have been killed. You know, it's crazy. Even Hezbollah is admitting most of those killed in Lebanon have been Hezbollah. The international press doesn't differentiate. So that's one. Two, cancel this law, creep normalization, start changing the tune, the attitude in Lebanese society against Israel. And if the Lebanese state can reclaim Beirut, and I'll throw out even something crazier that you guys I know will have a good opinion on. There's been tensions between Syria, and this new Syrian regime is definitely has a huge grudge against Hezbollah. If Syria might be able to do something on the border, I don't know if go in, but certainly shut down the border to smuggling. Syria, by the way, arrested a massive Hezbollah cell in Syria this week. We reported on that as well. And at the same time, we're clearing out the south, and the Lebanese state starts clearing out Beirut, maybe north of Beirut, maybe north of northern Lebanon. You have a chance to weaken them to the point where they might say, you know what, let's become a political party and maybe not a militia. Or they fight to the death and there's a civil war, but it's a civil war where they're significantly weaker.
I think the only way is with them fighting to the death. I don't think, because they're extreme, really. They might change groups, change factions, look for someone else to pay them, but this is obviously a very religious conflict, and in the West, they don't like to call it that way. But one thing I want to say here is the worst thing that can happen to Lebanon is if Syria gets involved. Because if the Syrian army, and we know the Syrian army right now is composed of many factions of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and soldiers affiliated, and also they open the border for a lot of the Bedouin factions to come, and they hold extreme grudge towards Hezbollah. Now, we've seen what they did when they've raided the Alawites, when they've raided the Christians, when they've raided, the Druze mountains. They go, they plunder, they kill, they steal, they, violate women, they behead people, and they, make videos, October 7th style. Now, if they will get the chance to enter the Lebanon, it's not like the IDF. The IDF goes and sends a message. I've seen a video where they're literally talking to a fireman in a city in Lebanon and telling him, are you sure that everyone is out of the building? Yes, I'm sure. Okay, just confirm. Yes, I'm confirmed. Then everybody stay out. Controlled demolition, basically. We've seen the IDF is going with, a needle, looking to see that there's no civilians around, and then striking, if needed, even waiting. The Syrian army and the Syrian people, if they will manage to enter to Lebanon, the level of disaster that they will bring.
Yeah, they're not going to do that.
Oh, they will burn Lebanon. They will burn anything in their way. And because in their eyes, Lebanon has been killing them for so long. Hezbollah, mind you, when Assad regime became so weak, and the only way that Assad was able to stay in power was by Russia supporting it and by Hezbollah being the force in behalf of Iran going and killing the Syrians on their behalf, along with their army was dropping barrels on them from airplanes. So the Syrians didn't forget that. And also we have here a matter of Sunni versus Shia, which is an ancient kind of battle. But something that you've mentioned here even before, and also you, about how crazy it was that it was illegal for Lebanese to contact Israelis. And we know that it's still illegal, yeah. And I know that in Syria, it was maybe even more illegal. And that's a bit crazy that these countries are literally preventing the people that might have a chance to have a peace. And the first way to have peace with your neighbors is to get to know thy neighbor. And when these countries have a severe punishment for anyone who is caught talking to them on the phone or, posting, commenting something, then that is the definition of quenching the hope for peace and oppressing your own people so they don't have a chance. And Lebanon right now is facing that exactly. They're going to have to internally fight against that. The people who want peace need to be brave and strong, and we're seeing their voices, but they need to be very resilient to make sure that their voice is louder than the voices of hate, that the voice of peace is louder than the voices of war.
Can I jump on one last thing before we actually have to move on, just because we can spend hours just talking about this because it's just such an important and interesting development, and as well as very complex, right?
I have a feeling we're going to be coming back to this every week.
I know. So, like you mentioned the financial aspect, Hezbollah is very important for our audience to know. Hezbollah is also a narco-terrorist organization. So they live off of drug trade that is mainly, of course, across the region, but also it's in Central and South America. So that's like another element of how Hezbollah has been terrorizing communities. They partner with narco terrorists in these countries,
Yeah,
and
Venezuela was obviously Venezuela and Cuba are the
was
big
a major hub. Venezuela was a very big case because it was the regime was also a narco-terrorist regime that is basically giving them fake passports, giving them entire massive amount of funding and access to be able to go and do their drug trafficking across North America, Central America, and South America. So look, I wanted to ask you, Mansour, because now like they are weaker. Even the Kard al Hassan, which is the major financial hub, has been targeted by the IDF, and they're just basically in a tighter spot. And we're seeing the growing amount of outwards criticism and hate and complete kind of rebellion against Hezbollah in Lebanon, specifically from the other sects, but also growing within the Shiite communities. Now, for the Druze, and because you're Druze, I wanted to ask you this. For the Druze, it's a little bit complex because we have Walid Jumblat, who is from like the old school, left leaning, I guess, Arab nationalist, anti the West, anti all of these values that Israel represents, the United States represents, and he's been actually one of the last standing political elements in Lebanon to support Hezbollah, and this is to the disheartening of a lot of the people in the Druze community in Lebanon. That said, he is the most powerful Druze leader in Lebanon. So because you're Druze, I kind of wanted to ask you, because we know that the Druze in Syria have been very open about, not only that they want to have peace with Israel, they're holding the Israeli flag in their protests. They've been defended by Israel when the attacks against their communities happened by the Islamist elements within the Syrian forces. So, we know that this is a reality for the Druze, and we know that the Druze in Israel are basically one of the most, I think, successful communities of the Druze, right, across the region. It is the one in Israel. But what about the Druze in Lebanon? We don't hear them. They're kind of, I feel like they're disfranchised in a way.
Yeah, that's a very good question because history is judging this moment right now, and the Druze have a very long memory. They don't forget very easily. And every Druze around the world knows that Israel saved the Druze. Every Druze. It was undoubtedly clear. Tens of thousands, and even hundreds of thousands of jihadists came to massacre them, plunder, and take their women and daughters, and nobody stood by their side except from Israel. So this is beyond any doubt. Now, what happened is in Lebanon, there's a split. There is the Druze who wanna actually have peace with Israel, who love us and love them, and we're relatives. But they are right now oppressed by Hezbollah and by Jumblat, who is basically like the Judenrat during the times of Nazi Germany, working for the Nazis. So Jumblat and his people,
right? Yeah.
yeah, they're the one who are collaborating with Hezbollah and helping Hezbollah oppress the Druze. Now, people in Lebanon are very afraid of him, financially, military-wise, so many things, revenge. But slowly, as you will see Hezbollah being crushed, you'll start seeing these voices rising up. And that's the thing that I think the people need to understand. The only way to defeat Hezbollah is to not only crush it and destroy it, but also to humiliate it. That's the language that you need to speak in the Middle East. In Arabic, we call بهدلهن. When Hezbollah بيكون مبهدل and becomes humiliated, that's when you'll see they will feel so ashamed, because that's a big thing in the Arab world, that shame. And Hezbollah have been puffing itself so big, way beyond its means, saying that we are, because of us, we are the ones, going to defeat Israel. Because of us, Israel doesn't dare. And now they're being seen as a joke. Not only that they're not able to defend Lebanon, they're the one causing this in Lebanon, and also they're so easily defeated. Way easier than Hamas, for example. And there's other reasons for that. But what's happening is they need to keep pressing on Hezbollah and keep humiliating. One of the reasons that we're seeing the drones right now attack happening in Lebanon is because they want to, throw the peace agreement and destroy it, but also because they're trying to gain points of favor. And they're saying if we manage to imitate Ukraine, we can start, dealing casualties to Israel, and at least will show that we're not this bunch of losers that are just running with their tails between their legs, barely capable of doing casualties to Israel, and undoubtedly not capable to defend the South. The South right now is controlled by Israel, literally completely, and they're flattening everything out there. So Hezbollah is right now in it's an animal, a wounded animal with its back to the wall, one side Syria, one side Israel, one side the Lebanese people that don't want them anymore. And they're right now, and Iran, their Patreon is basically barely capable of supporting them, and now they really need to do in their dying moments something to make them survive and stay relevant. If Israel and Lebanon will keep pushing on them, and that's why you're seeing this coming together, then Hezbollah will be destroyed and will be out of the picture, at least not relevant like it was before. But if they will stop now, they will deal with them tomorrow.
And let me tell you, I am very optimistic about the situation in Lebanon. I really believe that peace is not only possible, but it's actually going to happen. And I believe it will happen before Gaza. I think it will happen. I think other countries will also be joining the Abraham Accords across the region. But Lebanon seems to be a lot more eminent. And let's leave on this hopeful note, because we really, I think all of us believe that. And look, guys, on the screen, it says subscribe to our YouTube channel. I want to encourage you guys. We have a lot of exclusive content that we're putting out from across the Middle East, things that you do not see on traditional media or social media that are happening in the Middle East. We have Lebanese parliament members who appeared with us to talk about their position on these issues. So if you want to hear these important voices that you do not get on traditional media or social media, subscribe to our Middle East 24 on YouTube, because we have all of this exclusive content coming to you daily and exclusively through our channels. So please go ahead and do so. And now let's move to the other topic from our conversation today. And you know what? I'm sorry, but we do have to run faster through the other topics.
We will run fast, but we will tell our audience listening live, as we are, if you have questions, obviously comments, but if you have good questions, drop them in the chat, whether you're watching on X, whether you're watching on YouTube. If you're joining us from Visegrad, or from Mansour's excellent channel, please give us a follow on ME24. And if you're joining from Visegrad or our platform, please make sure to follow Mansour. And if you're not following Visegrad, that means you're living under a rock, because it's one of the biggest platforms in the world. All right, let's keep going, Havi.
All right, well, let's go to this other very, very hot topic. Obviously, the situation with the regime in Iran. We know that the Trump administration has been prioritizing negotiations. It's obviously tough. It's taking a stand about not allowing the Strait of Hormuz to become a point where the Islamic Republic regime is able to continue to blackmail the world by preventing kind of the world economy from moving in that area, which is 20% of the world economy goes through the Strait of Hormuz. We know that Operation Freedom, however, had been paused literally yesterday. There are a lot of assessments on what does that mean. We know that the Islamic Republic regime's programs, whether the ballistic missile program or the nuclear program, have been weakened a lot, but they have not been completely dismantled. Of course, there are different comments that we hear, but the IAEA, they remain to be blocked from entering to these sites. We know that the Islamic Republic regime continues to attack regional countries. They've been attacking the UAE continuously just a couple of days ago. But also there are kind of speculations about if the Trump administration has actually ended the operations that were kind of launching against the regime, trying to give the negotiations a final chance. And then if the regime does not comply, that the administration will go ahead and start another operation, because we know that these ballistic programs and nuclear programs are they aim to target the West, the United States, and US national security interests, and of course, our allies, Israel, Gulf countries. And we've seen what the regime has been doing across the region, ravaging, dismantling destroying capitals, and of course, killing massive amounts of people and supporting terrorist organizations. So let's try to talk about what do you guys think that Trump's strategy is today, and with basically the threat and the ultimatum that it's giving the regime now that we have this final week of potential talks.
You want to jump in, Mansour, or you want me to?
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'll jump after.
I'll say, first of all, we did a couple of excellent podcasts. Our main ME24 podcast is called Breakdown, Middle East Breakdown. And it's because we're breaking it down for you, not because the Middle East is breaking down. Don't worry. And make sure to check that out on our YouTube channel. Again, subscribe.
We want it to build back up. We're trying to get it built back up. That's
So we should call it build up, Middle East build up. But then it sounds like an arms build up, so we want to be careful.
Let them know what's actually happening. So
Look, we've had a number of excellent podcasts. Last week we had Greg Roman from the Middle East Forum. We had Ahmed Qureshi, who's an Iran expert based in Islamabad. This week we had Ahmed Kuzai, who's an Iran expert based in Bahrain. And then we had Jason Brodsky from United Against Nuclear Iran. We've had a whole series of excellent podcasts breaking down the whole Iran issue. So make sure to check that out. Here's the thing. It's really not clear what this regime intends to do or not. And it's really not clear what's actually happening as far as the negotiations, as far as the Hormuz, et cetera. And I'll kind of try to build this framework and then we can take it from here. So you have the Iranian regime who is pretending possibly to be divided amongst themselves, right? You have the hardliners, you have the hardline pragmatists, that is the ones who are just as hardline, but they know how to